r/AskReddit by Planet Reddit. Teachers of Reddit. What is something a student of yours has said that made you think, wow, there is no hope left for you? Principal at an inner city high school. I had to sit down with a student who had been caught plagiarizing for a second time. This time from The Onion. I had a student use The Onion as a source, specifically this one: Barry Bonds took steroids. Reports everyone who has ever watched baseball. Hey now. The inability to tell satire from news is a really popular style of idiocy these days. Edit. Mostly yes. High school teacher here. Dude. If you don't start coming to class and doing the work, you'll fail out of school. School's done nothing for me. I'm gonna rap to pay the bills. Bro. Kid was an awful musician. Couldn't make a beat. Couldn't write a rhyme to save his life. I have had 3 now successful rappers graduate from my class. Years later 2 of them have given up on the whole thing as more than a hobby and one is still touring in Europe. So when I have some kid rap terribly at me and say that's how he's going to make his money as an excuse for not doing anything in my class, I just laugh and then advise them to work on their flow. I've been a musician for almost 20 years now, although I teach different subjects. Not band. I've had students that you could just see were on their way to professional or semi-professional status. But they always took their education seriously as well. Unfortunately, the one kid was just mentally checked out at school and not talented enough to back that up. There was this kid named Lawrence who was one of those typical wallflower Catholic kids I grew up with. His dad was in our scout troop as a leader and was really meticulous. Like everything had to be just so. In the late 70s, most of the troop leaders had a relaxed dress code. But Lawrence's dad dressed like a 1940s scouting manual model. Complete with a brown uniform and wide-brimmed hat. Everything was pleated and pressed. His dad drove an old MG Roadster that was constantly breaking down. They were upper class. And mom was not in the picture. But the way Lawrence's dad picked on him was brutal. Stand up straight. Lawrence. Chin up. Be a good lad. Chest out. Chin up. Lawrence. Don't go over there. It's dirty over there. Lawrence. Stand straight and tall when I address you. Don't be rude. Wait until I have started eating before you start. Lawrence. Do I have to raise my voice? Lawrence. By high school, Lawrence just gave up. He wasn't perfect enough, so why bother? He stared into space. He attended school in person only. Just a blank and hollow shell. His clothing didn't change. It only became dirtier. His hair got long. He lost weight. And his clothes just hung on him. I think the only way to deal with his dad's control issues was passive resistance. By his senior year in high school, he flunked out. Not sure what happened to him after that. He wasn't perfect enough, so why bother? I see so much of that. Kid, totally serious, I'm going to drop out. I'll make money off of YouTube. Me, how many views are your videos getting? Kid, I have 4 subscribers. So I just need a few more. I have over 600,000 views and my estimated revenue is $0.14. Edit. For the people who want to know, it's 14 cents per month. Edit 2. The video had ads on it and it got a lot of watch time. Maybe it's a regional thing since I don't live in the US. Maybe ads here differ from ads there. Maybe it was because I had ads a long time ago. But I only have about 21,00023,000 views and my estimated earnings are about $12.50. Edit. Just in case anyone wants to see the stats. Here's some screenshots I just took. Most of the revenue came from 2013. I teach high school math geometry. One of my students said, why do we even need math? All I care about is money. His classmates proceeded to laugh. Bet his plan for making all that money is the casino. Spent 15 minutes on a math lesson. Do examples. Hand out worksheet. Do one on the worksheet with them. He asked. So you just want us to fill this in with random numbers? Speechless. Incident number 1. Can we just not learn this? It's hard. We should just skip it. Incident number 2. I don't have to get good grades. My grandfather owns a house and when he dies, My family is going to sell it for $1 million. So I won't have to ever get a job. I like how people think $1 million means they and their families are set for life. I have a distant aunt like that screwed my mother and all her siblings and close family over manipulating her father to change the will on his deathbed. She wanted all the money so she'd never have to work again. She spent it all inside 6 months and is now almost completely broke. She destroyed any shred of love any of her family had for her. Really truly a horrible person. My wife told me this story about a time she was lecturing a kid on why he should try to do well in school. She asked him what he wanted to be when he grows up. His response, I want to be in jail. That's where my dad and uncle is. She had no response. Probably the only time in her career that she was left speechless by a student. Duck. That's actually really sad. If you study you could get a job as a guard in their jail and make life nice for your dad and uncle as well as seeing them every day. I had a student who was always acting up. I constantly tried talking to him about his behavior. And I wrote plenty of referrals. Throughout all of this I would email and call his mother. But never got a response. One day he was pacing around and texting someone. I told him to put his phone away and he said I can't. I'm not too happy right now. So I said, will you take it out to the hall and I'll give you 1 minute? His response really shook me. He said no. I'll sit down. I just want my mom to turn the water back on. When all you know about a student is what you see in the classroom, it can be easy to forget they may not have a great home life. So I did wonder, is there hope for him? But it also wasn't truly any fault of his own. He just had a shit home life where he was stricken by poverty. This is how my niece is. It's terrible. She's 15 and should be worrying about school and college. Instead she worries about getting the younger kids up. Getting them dressed and fed. On Monday she texted me asking if I could drop off some bread and milk and cereal. It's just so frustrating because there are 3 adults in that house and none of them work. They're just junkies. Edit. We have called CPS. More times than we can count. Her mother had her at 15. And then just kept having kids. My sil also grew up in a similar home to the one she's providing now. I really just think it's one of those cycles that she just didn't break. Her thought process is, I grew up like this. So why make it any different for my kids? All 4 of them have different dads and only one of them has a dad that's involved. Can't you call child services? Man. Why do people have kids if they are not going to love them and show them a proper path to a nice future? I can't understand that. I want to be a drug dealer. But the cool kind. You know. The ones that wear a suit and carry a briefcase. He was 17 at the time and completely serious. He was expelled a month later for jumping another student. When is the teacher coming? This wasn't the first lesson I had with this child. Subtle yet devastating. I teach first year US law students. More than you would care to believe. They don't know America has 3 branches of government. Much less what the branches do. I teach computer science in university. I get a lot of freshmen that plucked the major because they heard it was a high-paying major. But don't actually like the subject. But the worst was a recent student that asked if they could just do the assignments by hand. They didn't want to use a computer. They didn't really like using them. People use computers too much. I don't stop doing that. Also thought computers could do too much. And wanted people to stop using them. Bruh. This is a programming course. For computers. In a major about making computers do things. You are gonna need to use a computer. Needless to say. I told them this wasn't probably the major for them. I used to teach science in a public high school. Had to convince a sophomore that trees came from seeds. Blew his mind. I had a first grader throw chairs and desks at me for about a week, after 2 months of horrific behavior that the parents and administration ignored. One hard enough to injure my knee. Before I finally had enough video evidence for the principal to get involved. He, student, refused to speak to me at all. Eventually my co-teaching partner got him to explain why he was doing it. I just don't like him. I feel bad for the kid. He has serious emotional problems. I don't know if I'd say there is no hope left. Because first grade is pretty young to write someone off. I hope he gets treatment. Did you ever file some kind of complaint about the non-action of the administration? There's not much I could have done. TBH. The administration at a school has nearly unlimited power versus anyone but angry parents. And the parents just didn't care. I had one 4-year-old who couldn't hold a pencil. He couldn't remember how to pick it up. And didn't have the strength to push it down hard enough on the paper to get any leverage. He couldn't color. Had no motor skills whatsoever. He didn't have a dominant hand. His parents liked to leave him at my learning center for an hour. Even though he couldn't use the bathroom on his own. He was 4 years old and didn't have the slightest grasp of the alphabet. And couldn't retain anything we taught him. It took a month to get him to count to 10. My theory on all this is, on top of a learning disability developmental delay his mom was in denial of. He was a natural lefty who was forced to use his right hand but, because of the disability, couldn't. And ended up not developing any motor skills in either hand. Poor kid. Actually, could I ask you? I have a 4-year-old. She is fine in every single respect except the pencil. She holds it completely wrong. Any advice? I have tried working with her a lot on this. Crayons and markers aren't a problem. Just pencils. Her teachers aren't worried about it but I am a bit. Do you use regular pencils or the thick ones? They also have the thick triangular ones which could be useful. How is she holding it? Usually I physically put the pencil in the right position, crook between the thumb and pointer. Then in between the tips of the pointer and middle finger and near the wood part of the pencil by the point. Some kids do hold it differently though. So as long as they have leverage on it it's fine. This kid was holding it full fist with the point coming out the pinky side of the fist. And so far from the point he couldn't stop it from wobbling. Not a teacher but worked at a school for a while. Had a 4th grader say that he didn't need school because he was going to have a wife and she would do everything. Same student while disrupting the entire class also said, "What are you going to do? I know you can't hit me." I'm getting abuse vibes here. At the time, the kid was visiting the school social worker multiple times a week. Dad wouldn't hold a job while mom did everything. And learned from dad to disrespect rules and that getting into trouble meant nothing. Kid was expelled shortly after that for beating and holding another student against the wall and threatening to kill him. We wish we could have done something for the kid. But it was a small private school with limited resources and the parents didn't help with reinforcement. We were happy when the parents pulled the older 2 kids out as well since they were starting to cause a lot of problems as well. A girl, 8th grade, told me she wanted to have kids, 2-3, by the time she was 18 so she could have the energy to keep up with them and then be a stripper to support them. Not a teacher but my wife had a student in 3rd grade who refused to do any writing assignments. My wife told him that she was going to call his parents to explain to them what was going on if he didn't start doing his work. He said, "I don't care. My mom said I don't have to do anything I don't want to do. Rules don't apply to me." My wife called his mom and his mom told my wife that she, meaning my wife, just has to understand how her son is and if he doesn't want to do the work, then he doesn't have to. His behaviors all made sense after that and it was a very tough year. He stopped doing all work and started harassing other kids, probably partially due to boredom since he was doing nothing else by the end of the year. As long as he was happy. My wife couldn't get the mom on board. This ends with the student being moved out of the class so the other students can learn in peace. Right? You have no idea how public school works. This ends with him passing to 4th GR. I taught lower elementary. Most teachers will get frustrated at some point by how hard it can be to get a child who may be lacking upstairs some extra help. This was the case with one of my favorite students. It didn't matter that he couldn't do any of the work that his peers were doing. Due to his incredibly low IQ. He was performing at his ability level. But he was just so nice to everyone. I had set aside time every day to help him with his reading. We were using the short story of The Ugly Duckling. It had one short sentence on each page and after 2 weeks, he could get through it with minimal help. However, reading the words isn't all there is to reading. I had asked him if he could tell me what the story was about since we had spent time on it every day for the last 2 weeks. He starts his oral retelling off great and I'm super excited. This is a huge deal for my man because up until this point, I couldn't get any retell or comprehension out of him. I'm super pumped and he is feeding off my energy and he's so proud of himself. This kid is glowing. We are only 3/4 through the story though. We come up to the end of the ugly ducking and he's telling me that the duckling changes. This word took his forever to say, much less read. But then he stops and goes into this deep think stage. I prod him a little bit, he changes. What does he change into, bud? He brings his eyes back from the ceiling and then with the biggest smile, he shouts out a butterfly. That's actually very sweet. Props to you for being patient with him. I used to do English intervention in a kindergarten class. I was working on the letters of the alphabet with this one girl for weeks. We'd get 3-4 letters each time we worked together. But they were almost certainly forgotten by the next day. One Monday I show up, after working with her the previous Friday, and she's able to do the whole thing, including identifying randomly chosen letters with almost no hesitation. Kids' minds are weird. At their own speed can change drastically over a very short period of time. While teaching about a particular historical figure, I try to wake this kid up. Did he sell drugs? Common no. Then I don't give a shit. He'll be interested in the British opium trade then. I ain't doing any of that shit. My mom already said she's signing the papers to drop out as soon as I turn 16. Edit. I know that many people often drop out and end up going back to get a get. I sincerely hope this young man turns his life around. He's had an incredibly tough upbringing. And along with that, a history of violent conduct in and out of school. I tried my best to remain patient with him in my room. And to motivate him any way I could. At the point he said those words, I just don't think there was anything more I could do. That was last year. And he hasn't been back to school this year. I really hope that, at some point, he figures things out and gets his life going in a positive direction. Whatever that may be. Are there really papers to sign in order to drop out? I thought you just stopped showing up. Well, you can legally withdraw at 16. Or you can just drop out whenever. It's like giving 2 weeks notice and a letter of resignation. Or just not showing up. University professor here. A student last term never purchased the textbook, and thus never did his homework. Sat in the back and spaced out all class. Failed one exam. And barely passed the other. He came to me during the final week of class to ask me if he could do all of his missed assignments and then asked why I didn't remind him to do them. Bro. This is university. I'm not chasing after you. I had one who stopped coming to class for the last 6 weeks of semester. And instead of writing the essay on the exam, wrote a 2-page rant about how unfair it was of me to base the exam on stuff that happened in class. Also in the rant, complaints about how I had not called her to remind her to do assignments. Come to class and find out what was on the exam. I'm not trying to defend this guy, BC, obviously he really messed up. But I just want to say duck buying college textbooks. I am a teacher. But the quote is from my sister. I don't need to go to college. Because it's easier to see God when you're in the gutter. 5 years later she's in a trailer with her abusive fiance. And God. Nah, she's got a trailer. Probably one of them fancy schmancy trailers with a roof. I work at an alternative school for kids kicked out of public school for severe emotional and behavioral issues. A lot of them are going to require government services for the rest of their lives. There's usually not just one thing they say. But we know that they will never have normal lives. It's a little disheartening to hear a 6-year-old scream that he's going to duck and kill you. Especially when you were playing tag not 5 minutes before. There's a young boy who can be very sweet and is an adorable blonde butterball. However, he has pretty severe behaviors and gets restrained at some point on a daily basis. I saw his parents one day because they live in government subsidized housing close by and walk him to school. It was 50 degrees out and the little boy was in a basketball jersey and shorts. His parents looked exactly how I expected them to look and were rude to all the staff they interacted with. It just showed me that no matter how much we do, he spends most of his life with his shitty parents. Edit. Having a child with behaviors doesn't inherently make someone a bad parent. But in our program specifically, Most of the students come from harsh backgrounds which either causes or exacerbates their behavior. My stepdaughter goes to an alternative school due to the support they offer for kids with learning disabilities and emotional issues. The largest class she's in is 5. So there's a higher level of support. Her mom is abusive and she is already 17. She's a good kid, but she has an intense sense of justice and feels a need to bring justice if she doesn't feel others are fixing the wrongdoing. Getting it in control now is nearly impossible. I fear for her. The situations she loses her cool are completely rational. But people can't go beat up people like the parents of the child you mentioned. I'm trying to help drive home the point of positive action to fix the problems she sees. But it's hard. We went to the open house and we saw the types of kids these teachers work with. A high percentage of the girls were pregnant. A good portion of them had an absolutely terrible attitude. A couple had ankle bracelets on them. The kids in the school want to graduate. If they didn't, they wouldn't be there. They're on their last shot. I don't know how the teachers do what they do. But they're all very good at what they do. They have the patience of saints. I taught in a school like this and had a kid tell me I'm gonna piss on you for asking him to get a pencil from my desk. He then said that repeatedly for an hour. He never did it because kids would be restrained for any sort of aggressive behavior. He had been severely abused sexually by his grandfather and was not allowed to be around his family, but I saw a picture in his room and they were what you'd expect. I had a student say, "I don't need to learn any of this. I won't use it in real life." When I tried to explain why math was going to be useful, he responded, "You're a dumbass. Watch me get rich without even going to school." I mean, sure, it's been done, but probably not the best idea. Are we ever going to use this as an adult? You won't. But some of the smart kids will. I worked in vet clinics for 15 years. Here's an example of something I heard every day. Me. "Okay. Go ahead and set the carrier on the scale." Owner. "Don't you want me to take the cat out?" Me. "No. We don't want the cat loose in the clinic. Just go ahead and put the carrier with the cat on the scale." Owner puts the cat carrier on the scale. I write down the weight. Me. "Okay. Let's head to the exam room." Owner. "But how much does the cat weigh?" Me. "When we get you into a secured room, we'll get the cat out and weigh the carrier." Owner. "But how will you know how much the cat weighs?" Me. "Algebra. Every day." Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.